Hello, lovely people. Welcome back to Kolber's Corner for another fortnight, another go-around. This strategy, again, we're thinking literacy, and we're dealing with literature circles. So, of course, this, as the name suggests, sounds like a very English teacher strategy, but it's just a good way to get students engaging with text of any type, and it's especially useful for texts that are, I guess, a little bit difficult or a little bit outside of their normal range of experience. So, you might be you could get students to read, say, a pure non-fiction history book. You get them to read, I don't know, perhaps a simplistic or a simple academic article if you're in the science field, kind of like a little scientific report, ideally a sort of not too long one, of course, but you're sort of just getting students to engage with real literature. So, and of course, in the second or additional language space, you might like to find a text that's in your target language that you're teaching, and get students to have a go at understanding and interpreting it. So, at least for me, I think this works. Literature circles work best when you add a text that's perhaps a little bit uncommon or slightly outside of the students' kind of range of understanding, because they're going to be reading it as a group, and so there's sort of the ability there to scaffold and build upon one another's knowledge. So, literature circle, if you're thinking classroom based, students are either in circles, in chairs, or on the floor, essentially is what you're imagining. And of course, group selection is crucial, because you don't want, you kind of want a mixed ability group, but you don't want necessarily straight friendship groups, because then it's just a chance to sit around and hang out. And of course, you need to put in place sort of some kind of accountability strategy so that you can make sure that students are doing what you expect them to be doing, of course, but that's, rather like every classroom activity ever. So no great knocks on it for that. So importantly, the students will each have a role, and there's 1,000 different roles depending on who you ask and depending on whose model you're looking at. So I'll give you a little overview of some of the possibilities, but again, as with any classroom strategy or activity you're trying to do, you'll be thinking about what you want to focus on within your class. Ideally, you'd have some of, or these are some examples of some of the kind of roles that you might have. So you could have a discussion director, kind of like someone who's asking the questions and prompting people. And again, depending on the age of your students, are you trusting that person to develop their own questions, or are you instead providing the questions that that they're being asked to respond to? Someone to sort of be the highlighter, someone who's highlighting key phrases or key passages, and then you might ask them, depending on your focus, to read those things aloud to the group, or perhaps even the whole class group afterwards. You might have someone illustrating, so they're drawing the passage or the character or the focus or the study or whatever is in your text. You might have someone being sort of a connector. So they're saying, well, this relates to what we've learned in class, or it relates to this movie I saw on the weekend, or it relates to this, whatever the young people are into these days. Typically, you'd have someone doing a summarizing job. So they're kind of, and importantly, I should have probably already covered this, but the literature circles are all looking at different texts. So there's no point having them all reading the same text at the exact same time. And of course, as they're reading different texts, you can give out different levels of texts and those sort of things. So that's kind of another sort of element that you can consider when you're generating your groups. You might have students at certain reading levels and so forth. Keeping in mind all the other elements I mentioned as well around grouping and personality and friendship groups and so forth. Another role, you might have someone looking at vocabulary. So they're kind of doing a bit of the Googling, a bit of the dictionarying, thesaurussing, if those still exist in classrooms, and getting them to kind of pull out keywords and note them down somewhere. And then perhaps you could do a Freya model or something similar, develop a word list in that way. You might like to have someone sort of mapping out the kind of plot points, or drawing a map, or some kind of visual representation of what's happening in the text. And then you might have someone looking into the author, being the investigator, being the person that looks at who wrote the book, and kind of looking for those kind of clues around how can we get a clear picture of the sort of the focus of the text based on who it's written by, or where it's found, or text type, and all those sort of things. So that's a very lengthy kind of option set of roles, but I think that covers off most of the important ones. I might add something like the predictor, who is like, at the end of each certain part of a text, you get the group to pause and they say what they think might be coming next. Just another way to get students to sort of be actively involved. But of course, the focus of all of this should very much be whatever skills you're trying to inculcate in your students. So you might pick some of those as important. Like I would leave out the illustrator, for example, in my classroom because, while that's fun, I think everyone in the group could potentially see that that's kind of the cushy role compared to some of the others, which are highlighting and paraphrasing key passages and so forth. So depends entirely on the groups of students that you've got, what text you're looking at, and so forth. But just a different way to be engaging with texts and writing in your classroom. So that's literature circles. Give them a go. It's definitely the type of strategy that takes a lot of commitment. I think if you just do it as sort of a once-off, you'll probably find that was a mess. Behaviour was all over the place. But it's something you should probably commit to if you think it's of use. And of course, your first attempt at it probably won't be a great success just because of the nature of it being slightly different sort of patterns and behaviours within classrooms. So literature circles, give them a go. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, keep learning.